Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Cash Flow Forecasting Software, where we help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind and model everything from cash flow through to complex scenarios with clarity and control. And joining me today is Abhijit Verekar, founder of Avero Advisors, where they're committed to helping public agencies simplify government interactions through modern, efficient, and automated systems that improve operations, maximize the impact of tax dollars, and ultimately a better outcome for the citizen. And today we'll explore the strategy and process for implementing AI into large organizations, from pitfalls through to the best practices. Welcome to the show, AB.
Hey, thank you, Blaine. Pleasure to be here.
So I guess first off, I want to dive in. Like, you've been working with government agencies for a long time, I suspect. AI is really quite new. I know that's kind of the topic of the day, but it's also an area that I really want to explore because it's a pinch point for a lot of organizations. Tell me a little bit about just a ballpark. What are some of the things you're hearing back from large organizations that are their greatest concerns in getting started with AI?
There's several flavors to this problem and opportunity at the same time. With my clients, it's simply where do we begin, right? Their issues are so entrenched, and they've been dealing with these issues for a long, long time. For example, most of our clients are running 20-plus-year-old technologies, financial systems, ERPs. Their infrastructure is not up to snuff. So when you go to conferences and meetings, you're seeing CFOs being sold the latest and greatest AI technology, but the reality is different on the ground for these agencies. So there's a huge gap in what they can practically implement and what's available on the market. And that tends to be a huge stumbling block for AI adoption.
Oh, I can see that. They want to jump all the way to AI, but they're using a desktop server rack in the corner with a bunch of wires spewing out of it. And that's a big change. To be so. In other words, I suspect they probably have to look at, you have to upgrade your ERP and go through a really exhaustive process to get to the point where you can actually start looking at AI as something that's works with that new system.
Yeah. Well, the promise of AI is that it's a force multiplier, right? You get to do more with less, more so than before, that you can talk to your data, that you can do all these wonderful things that our vendor friends are pushing on to our clients. And, a classic example is Copilot. There's a lot of people doing Copilot pilots just because it's free. It's included in their O365 stack. So why not use it? Without paying attention to the fact that, you may not have the right Copilot. There's so many different varieties of Copilot. So when you go down the rabbit hole of running a pilot for Copilot, it doesn't usually work. The second aspect of that is you don't have your data right. You don't have the right connections. You don't have the right data sources. So even if you had the right Copilot licensing, you're not going to be able to do a lot of those things that Microsoft is advertising to you as life-changing.
Yeah, you could have AI. We could have all of the data there, but you in your department, in your position, doesn't have access to maybe all of it that you need at a time, because and that's not going to change because we can't make it a free for all, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to me. Some of our most recent work in AI has had nothing to do with AI. I mean, we are a traditionally ERP consulting firm. We do a lot of business process redesign, helping clients get up to speed in terms of their technology. So here comes the AI wave where everyone is now talking about leapfrogging older ERP systems or just going to AI. We don't need to go upgrade to the next ERP generation. And what the smart clients are realizing is that you still have to do the non-sexy work. You can't just go buy the thing that's going to change your life. So governments traditionally work in silos. Even if you're in finance, you might have city finance and the sheriff's finance and the school finance. They don't talk to each other. They don't like each other. So good luck trying to implement AI that helps you do a certain thing. So then you're dealing with, how do we get along first? How do we start sharing data? How do we not become so siloed on protective of our data sets and our systems? because there is no use of AI if you can't get past that, right? And then
Yeah.
you layer on top of that the older technologies, the older infrastructure, policies get in the way. Your city or county may have some regulations about not using AI. I've seen that as recently
Mhm.
as last week. At the same
Mhm.
time, they're putting out RFPs inviting vendors to tell them what the latest and greatest in AI is. There's a huge mismatch between what people are selling, what our clientele is, um, their ground reality is, and there's a huge chasm in terms of how far they are from reality. I'm not saying that's
Mhm.
across the board. There's some very very forward thinking, forward looking government organizations out there that are taking a very nuanced, one step at a time approach to solving problems with AI, because you don't have to always eat it all in one bite.
Yeah, I've I'm sure you saw the MIT article that was saying that
Mm-hmm.
85% of the installations have failed, and it's not because AI doesn't work. It's to some degree,
Yeah.
garbage in, garbage out. I suspect there's a
Yep.
little bit of that too, but
Mm-hmm.
there's also these layers of like you said, it's somebody says, "Hey, here's this big shiny AI," uh, without asking, "Oh, okay, what system can we actually get to the data you need? Can you make
Yep.
all of that work?" And
Mm-hmm.
it's we're confronted with that almost every day, even with our business, because virtually everyone that comes to us, they're in spreadsheets. Like there
Yeah.
is no other option. There are spreadsheets, and we know the first task is, okay, let's get you out of spreadsheets. Let's get you 95% further ahead. Then we can start to taking those final little steps that add a little more
Yeah.
color and a little more insight. And But it's very practical, it's very pragmatic, and I think ultimately it's what's the end solution and how's it going to offer value to the organization, rather than simply sounds cool, we got
Yeah.
co-pilot in every nook and cranny of the organization, right?
Yeah. Well, and those organizations that are on spreadsheets are in a better spot than those that are on super custom 30-year-old AS400 green screens, because spreadsheet
Yeah.
is a universal tool. It's the biggest ERP system in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually leapfrog from spreadsheets to AI easier than those that are saddled with legacy software. Um,
Yeah.
the other piece of the puzzle here, I think it's in the general market, not just public sector, is it's more of a marketing race than it is a technology race anymore. The
Mm-hmm.
huge private equity venture money is going into any company that claims they have something AI, and then the race is to capture as many eyeballs and leads as possible, and then sell them something specific. I was at a
Mm-hmm.
conference last 2 weeks ago in San Jose. It was the Gov AI Coalition conference, where you had vendors getting up on stage saying, and I'm not kidding, the words being used were, buy this AI, buy my AI, and when you buy it, these things are going to happen. You couldn't help but look around and say, who's falling for this, right? Because you're not talking about no one spoke about ERP systems, no one spoke about internal controls, no one spoke about data hygiene and cleanliness.
Mm-hmm.
It's being sold as a silver bullet, which it isn't, unless you
Mm-hmm.
do the foundational work. And I suspect in the private sector, your clientele, they're a little more advanced. They're not as siloed. They're thinking of it from a business standpoint. There's a profit motive there, so they're moving a bit faster and adopting to these things they have to do before they buy the AI thing.
Yeah. Truthfully, I would say over the last 6 months, the number of CFOs that have asked about AI, because we work with generally mid-market businesses, and they're
Mm-hmm.
quite sophisticated. They know what they're looking for, what they need, right? The attitude has been primarily, literally, I've had this exact phrase a few times. Where are you at here? Okay, good, because it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's literally what has come back to us. Well, you know what? There's some things we think we can really help you with, but yes, let's first get you off of these spreadsheets and something that is highly workable and is going to solve that problem, and it can evolve down the road. And they really appreciate that, because they know what the outcome is that they need,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not tech for the sake of tech. It's tech for the sake of it's really volatile out there right now, and the CEO
Yeah.
needs to know this on a daily basis or a weekly basis. how do we do that, right? So
Yeah.
it's there's a familiarness to the original sort of dot bomb when there was this mad sort of rush to build out the internet and to build all these things out, and so many of these venture-backed companies failed miserably because it was vaporware. There was nothing behind
Yeah.
it, and there's a lot of confidence lost, I think, in it sounds so silly now, but in the internet from the public. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, it just kept moving forward.
Yeah.
It never stopped. It was everything
Mhm.
was moving online. It just wasn't the big news stories. And I kind of suspect that's going to happen with AI. There's going to be some high profile failures, but behind the scenes, there's going to be this engine that just keeps on going and going and growing and growing. And when it's done well, it will just blend right into their systems and processes.
Yeah, and it's not a separate thing, right? This is why I keep bringing up enterprise systems and ERPs where your data actually lives. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to replace it. Now, if you're paying attention to the software market, Oracle, Workday, SAP, all of these, big companies, IFS, they're making heavy bets on building AI within their products.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what does that mean? At a very basic level, you have your reporting. You can talk to your data. You can build dashboards with natural language. And on the higher end side, you have AI within the systems that can do the processing for you. Now, we've heard of the robotic process automation um, thing over the last 10 years or more. It's going to be on steroids if done well within these systems.
Yeah. So we're talking about vendors that are they're selling AI to organizations, but I suspect one of the issues we have here is that it's overpromise and underdeliver in a lot of ways, because they may be selling the system, the AI system, but they don't have the infrastructure underneath it to really run. So where these organizations are so large, they're so complex. How on earth do they actually kind of take hold of this and make sure that what they're getting actually fits like a glove and isn't in competition or butting heads with each other?
Yeah, we've all heard of the term vaporware, right? It's been
Yeah.
around forever. When we do system selections for clients, we nail down these vendors, and when I say these vendors, not all of them are unscrupulous, but there's players out there that want to sell you the thing and go away. So
Mm-hmm.
vaporware has been around for a while. It simply means things that are being sold to you that don't exist today, but that idea you just gave them is going to be developed. But it's being sold to you
Yeah.
today. You're going to pay for it today. That problem sort of went away when the market moved to SaaS and cloud and sort of homogenous products, and it's coming back with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
Vaporware is back. Custom development is back in the guise of AI, because when a AI vendor, quote unquote, asks the audience or a prospect, tell me what your problems are. We can solve any problem with AI. That tells me that they're
Mm-hmm.
going to build you a custom product, and now your shadow systems, your ghost products, that problem's going to be even worse. Um, when big players like Oracle, Workday start telling you that end users can build products on their platform without
Yes.
involving IT. Now IT's in a really precarious situation, because when these things break, that's who's going to get blamed. So
Yes.
we're not thinking through what the AI, quote unquote, is going to do to the organization. A, are you ready for this? Do you have the right guardrails in terms of privacy, in terms of policy, in terms of ethics?
Mm-hmm.
And do you even have the data sets available to take advantage of these tools? The other problem too, Blaine, is the design of these pilots. You and I both know if you don't put a good fence around what this pilot's supposed to be, it can go on for years, and a pilot then
Mm-hmm.
becomes a project that doesn't end. And a pilot, by definition, is something for proof of concept. You need to see, you have a hypothesis. Let's see if this works in this specific use case. and then you guardrail that off without it, taking on a life of its own. So early pilots are failing just because they're not designed well, because they're not
Yeah.
solving a specific problem. They're not going after a use case that is not going to take the whole organization down if it doesn't work.
Yes, and having worked with the government for in my last business for nearly a decade, we had a lot of government contracts, and the battle was always scope creep, and so that can
Mm-hmm.
come from basically either side, right?
Yeah.
If they're not sure what they're building and they're not sure what they're getting, it can just spiral out of control and
Mm-hmm.
just be a never ending, right? Um, I want to circle back a little bit to where you're talking about individuals essentially telling AI what they need and almost building their own software to
Mm-hmm.
solve tasks. I think one of the things that I would find kind of the most concerning isn't just that something might break or something might not work. The flip side of it is, from the outside, it actually looks like it works, but the
Yeah.
data isn't right. What it's giving back to you is actually inaccurate, but you may not even know it because something was broken in the process, something was ill planned in the process. There was a bit of information or data that you can't get and get into the mix. Um, Again, that sort of comes back to some of those guardrail areas. How do you put guardrails on an organization that has, likely tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of workers and computers running through an organization?
Yeah, I think you need to start globally. You cannot start with a siloed approach. There may be organizations that operate in such a way that an experiment here is not going to impact something down the road in another department. So having an overall, technology strategy, which is now an AI strategy, how are we going to deploy this? How do we design pilots? Who does what? Who's responsible for making sure that there's data stewardship, that we're not just uh, using data or giving it up to a vendor's, LLM for to be trained on. All of those things need
Mhm.
to be defined up front at the very top. Also keeping into account your do you have the right infrastructure? When I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of technology, right? Do you have the right servers,
Mhm.
networks? Do you have the right internet speeds? And these are problems my clients have,
Mhm.
where they're running off of a single ISP that's not even fiber optic. They're running off of residential grade Wi-Fi um, uh, systems. And how do you go from there to the 2025, where it's all AI and AI is going to change your life overnight? So
Mhm.
being cognizant of what you have, being cognizant of what the overall strategy is your leadership bought in? Because again, in the government space, you have to be uh, in line with what the council or commission or board of whatever wants to do, which is
Mhm.
what the public is telling them to do. So it's not very cut and dry where a CFO or a city manager can just go and do these things. Yes, experimentation on pilots is one thing, but I think, to your question, a global strategy that ties into the global vision, where the organization's headed in the next 3 to 5 years, that should dictate what technologies are adopted and what you get to play
Mhm.
with.
And so now let's take an organization that actually, okay, we've got an ERP system and it's cutting edge, it's working well, it's
Mm-hmm.
enabled, it's people have been trained, all the things to make it work, and they say, okay, we're ready to take this next step. How do they start taking that next step? And I circling back, to one of the earlier, parts of our conversation. How do they pick a technology and how do they limit the problems with the garbage in, garbage out on an LLM that is just flooded with
Yeah.
information?
Yeah, my latest thinking around that, and this is evolving, right, is again, you need to design your pilot well. Forget about the technology. Design your pilot. What outcomes are you trying to get to? What sort of automation are you trying to achieve? What low-hanging fruit exists, right? I mean, customer service tends to be a good one,
Mm-hmm.
where, yeah, chatbots are not that easy to deploy, but yes, they also are if they're very simply scraping your website and giving the end user an interface to talk to your data there. Very simple deployment. When it comes to what technology to use, I think it really depends on what your in-house capabilities are. If you have a
Mhm.
robust, well-educated IT workforce that has kept up with what's going on in the market, then you may do some more esoteric stuff like trying to build your own LLM and train your own AI agents. Uh, but in the market, what I'm seeing currently is those vendors that have picked a lane that are trying to solve a very specific problem are the ones that are being successful. If
Mhm.
you're going at it saying, "Tell me all your problems, I'm going to solve it with AI," you're in for
Yeah.
trouble because you're not specializing, right? Because every AI deployment is a project. It is still a software implementation. You still have to do the heavy lifting. You still have to do the coding. You still have to clean the data. So again, anyone that's selling you AI as a magic bullet is leading you astray because we again at the same conference I was talking about, there was one vendor whose marketing said there is no IT lift involved in deploying our product.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know how that works, right? Because your CFO is not going to be the one helping you
Mhm.
get the data together into a data lake or whatever methodologies you're using.
Yeah.
So I would stay away from vendors claiming to do all in model or ones that say there's no IT lift involved.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. When we're looking at where we think things are going, as we've talked about, it's a bunch of little PhD robots instead of one generalist, and that's what a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
LLMs are now. Is there is just a generalist that it can't necessarily discern what's useful information that's grabbed and what's accurate and what isn't accurate. And I
Yeah.
think there are some problems there where I think that, like you said, the successes that we seem to be seeing is ones that are very specific and they're it's like the bots trained or the agents trained on a very
Yeah.
narrow set of data and can do that really well. Uh, but I think that the other thing I like you saying is start with the easy one. Start where there's already
Mm-hmm.
been success. We've seen that even with our customers. Um, we always say, hey, let's start with something that's easy, that makes a lot of sense, that we can, rather. Sometimes they'd come in and say, well, let's tackle the hardest thing first, and if that works, everything will work.
Yeah.
Because it's there's all these layers of going through people, usually going through
Yeah.
people in an organization on training and adoption and everything. And that just seems to be, like you said, hey, let's pick customer support. That's one that that
Mm-hmm.
is we've seen a lot of success. Let's start there, and that seems like a really good path forward. Instead of trying to boil the ocean, let's implement one step at a time, and let's solve actual problems one step at a time.
Well, you also have to think about what impact failure might have, right? If you're doing this customer service focused AI pilot, yeah, you might run into some customers that, the AI lies to. Sure, like depending on who you are, that could be catastrophic or not. But it's a low impact use case, and I've seen
Mm-hmm.
vendors do well in just chatbot deployment. Then they go into voice based agentic call centers, and then that turns into like a really intelligent CRM solution that is AI backed. Now
Mm-hmm.
that's a really cool vertical use case in deploying
Yeah.
AI. But you're right, you can't boil the ocean, especially when you're not ready for it.
So I want to go back to a little bit at the beginning, because I think a lot of the organizations that like you mentioned, you're seeing and that we see, they're not quite ready for it to be highly effective. They don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
even have the ERP system in place. They do have sometimes for us, we hear it's the 15, 20-year-old ERP system sitting there. Sometimes it's a vertical specific ERP. It may not even be that old, but it is so incredibly limited to the vertical they're in or the industry they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to continue to limit them. What's the first step if you're talking with CFO, or I know you work with a lot of government agencies, like you're talking with those individuals? Um, how do you get them behind the idea that, hey, we have to likely rebuild out this infrastructure first to get to
Mm-hmm.
that end point?
In our case, it's, I'm not going to say easier, but it's slightly different because most of our clients are engaging us to help them move on to a new ERP system or a new
Mhm.
system of some kind, right? So you're coming from a heavily manual Excel-based solution, and Excel, by the way, exists just to prop up whatever system they've built for themselves or bought 20 years ago.
Mhm.
So it's our job to find those use cases and low-hanging fruit where in this process they can AI some things. Now, the other cool thing that's happening, Blaine, is because now most of the market is SaaS, like you're not seeing a lot of vendors offer on-premise solutions. There are some that will do it, but especially in
Mhm.
the public sector, it's all cloud and SaaS. And what that means is you're getting a vanilla system for the most part, right? It's going to work out of the box unless you want to modify it workflow wise and configure it in a certain way.
Mhm.
But think about why, or let me tell you why most of our clients move from an older system to a new one, because some 20 or 30% of the process is not automated and doesn't work. The rest of it's cool. It
Mhm.
works. Yes,
Yeah.
it's old. Yes, it's antiquated. But you're going to move from a green screen to a Workday or an Oracle because of that 20, 30%. And
Yeah.
guess what? When you move to some of these new ones, they're not going to pay attention to the 20, 30. They may solve the 20%, but they're gonna leave something else open. You know, what we see is, yes, you might have bought um, at the time a very advanced system 20 years ago, but then you've had someone in IT build a certain automation that it's like that meme where the
Mhm.
Jenga blocks and there's one little pebble holding the whole thing together. That
Yeah.
thing doesn't go away, right? So no matter what you deploy. So I think there's space in the market for AI to be used for micro SaaS like that, which isn't
Mhm.
it's not a new concept. We've had micro SaaS solutions before, but the speed at which you can now iterate and create product is really the new thing, right? Where you can
Mhm.
solve that problem for the client today while they solve their 80, 90% big issues with a big spend ERP. So where do you
Mhm.
start? I think it's in the business process, it's in the strategy, it's in the understanding of what you have, what you don't. And you know, most CFOs know where their biggest pain points are. And in our world, it tends to be payroll. Most of our
Mhm.
clients have one or two people for a large organization running payroll that shuts the whole organization down on payroll week because they're collecting
Yeah.
information manually. They're sticking it into the payroll system. A great example is a police department that we worked with, pretty large, 500 plus officers, and they're recording overtime on note cards, physical note cards, right?
Wow.
That get passed around and eventually end up in payroll. So uh, at the same time, they're going through an Oracle HCM implementation, and this little problem is not going to be solved by Oracle,
Mhm.
is what they've been told, unless you pay them gobs of money to customize it. So there's
Mhm.
an opportunity there to build something. I've seen recent products where permitting is a huge problem. Every growing city or not, the city's permitting process is a nightmare to navigate. And the
Yeah.
reason is A, they're understaffed, and B, a lot of times people don't know what to submit. So the timeline isn't in them saying yes or no to something, it's in the back and forth. Hey, you didn't submit the form, you didn't tick this box, you sent the wrong plans.
Yeah.
So there's products now that are doing nothing but quality checking the front end of
Mhm.
that process. So our job as consultants is sometimes to shine a light on those processes that are extremely manual, that have no hopes of being automated through your ERP system. And that's where it's ripe for some real cool pilots to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, AV, how should people get hold of you, and who should be talking with you to start tackling some of these problems?
Yeah, so our website is averoadvisors.com. I am on LinkedIn all the time, it seems like. Just look me up with my name. And then who should be talking to me? I think I get along really well with CFOs because I am a finance guy. It's my background.
Mhm. Yeah.
It never worked in finance, but I've got two master's degrees in finance. It helps me sort of connect the dots between tech and finance. So CFOs, CEOs, anyone that's trying to strategically solve a problem without jumping into buying a product let's talk.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much, AV. This was really interesting, a great conversation. I learned a lot. I always like to pick people's brains, especially around AI, because you can't keep up. There's so much change so quick. And if you are a CFO out there, if you and your finance team are stuck in spreadsheets to forecast your cash flow, model scenarios, present it to the management team so they understand where the business is headed. Come and see us at dryrun.com. We'd love to help you out.